hard to explain, okay? But
all day, all year round.
it's so mysterious.
This is who we are.
This is who we are. WADR.
Citizens Hour on West Africa Democracy Radio. It's your time to speak.
Hello there, and thank you for joining us on this edition of Citizens Hour, your democratic citizens engaging and current affairs radio program. We are coming to you live on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM, and we're also on Facebook and YouTube and streaming on WADR.org. Citizens Hour comes to you live every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. here in Dakar and 11:30 a.m. in Abuja and Cotonou, bringing you more engaging conversation. I am Imo Edet here in Dakar, and I do have my colleague Usman Umar in Abuja co-anchoring the program. Usman.
Yes, Umo, indeed. Good morning. Good morning, West Africa. Good morning from wherever it is you are watching us or listening to us from around the world. Indeed. Of course, we thank you for staying with us on this edition of Citizens Hour, where we bring you conversations that center on accountability, justice, and the voices of the ordinary people, most importantly. Now, on today's program, our discussion takes us from the corridors of international justice to the gridlock of national development. Of course, our first topic examines a major diplomatic shift, the UN's recognition of the slave trade as a crime against humanity. We are asking the question, beyond the declaration by the global body, what does this mean for the African continent and the global movement for reparations today? Imo.
Meanwhile, our second discussion focuses on the persistent blackout in Nigeria, and we are looking at the country's power crisis and asking, is this a result of policy failure, poor infrastructure, or a fundamental lack of political will to fix the national grid? Usman.
Of course, we welcome everyone. We welcome our listeners because joining us this very morning to dissect all of these topics and unpack them properly for our understanding, we have Mumuni Yakubu Nambe. He's a migration expert and a legal consultant in Ghana. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. We also have Dr. Weston Shilaho, an international relations scholar from the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa. And of course, very importantly, we have Jasmine Meekins, founder of the Reparations Imagination Laboratory and a dedicated Pan-Africanist. She's joining us from the United States. Welcome, gentlemen and lady, to the program.
All right, I think everybody's muted.
You may need to unmute your microphones.
Good morning.
Welcome, everyone. Good morning,
Morning,
Jasmine. Mr. Mumuni, good to see you. Mr. Weston, thank you so much for joining us from Johannesburg. All right, before we kickstart the program, we would like to listen to the voices of Africans on this resolution and what they make out of it. Take a listen. We'll be back.
One of the significances is that it presents, let me say, a unified continental voice. Because for decades, this call for reparations was led by individual civil society groups, but by bringing this as an official AU resolution, the continent is speaking as one bloc, as a unified front. So this shift from individual issues, individual complaints, to a collective African demand significantly increases the diplomatic pressure on the former colonial masters.
I hope that these talks open global political independent front for the African continent, broader trends where Africa is becoming more vocal in global political issues in terms of climate change, compensation, reform in the UN, security Council, African getting seats in that sense and having fair global trade rules. We are all humans, we are all equal, and we need to be treated equally. The African must be able to manage their own affairs.
It brings recognition, respect, and renewal. Many years pass since the cruelty of the slave trade, and present generations might actually end up not knowing how sordid the events of the past was. The resolution will serve as a reminder and a point of recognition, lest we forget the events of history.
All right, there you have it. Voices of Africans there speaking on the UN recognition and being hailed as a breakthrough. I would like to start with you, Jasmine. And I mean, beyond this breakthrough, how does this change the framework for those seeking reparative justice? Okay, I think Jasmine, can you hear me? Jasmine, are you
Yes.
there?
I'm there.
Okay, we were getting some interferences there. I'm asking, beyond this breakthrough, how does this change the framework for those seeking reparative justice? And is it a turning point for the Pan-African movement?
Yeah. Okay, so I need someone to mute their mic, Andrea.
Yeah.
Andrea, please,
Those
can you mute
joining
your
us,
mic?
please, you may need to mute your mic if you are not the one speaking so that we can get clearer audio, please. Thank you. Jasmine, you can go ahead.
Yeah. So to answer your question, yes, I do think this is a milestone in the reparations conversation. And I think, one of the things that is most important about this resolution is that it has shown that not only can Africa unite itself, but when we as African people on the continent and in the diaspora unite, the world unites around us. That is a political statement, and I think that is also an indication of how this movement is going to continue to grow and continue to unify and harness a political power that we haven't seen exist, one within the African people, the global African community, but also within the larger global community, because those votes show us that it's not just African people or people of African descent that agree that this was the gravest crime against humanity, but we have a global community behind us, and we have communities of other descendants of colonization and structural harm that are now saying we can band together and advance this work to a place where it hasn't been, and it hasn't been able to advance because for too long these conversations have been happening in individual countries or by individual groups. And I think we all realize that if we want to get different results, we have to do something different. And the key difference is doing this together.
Indeed. Usman.
All right, now let me go over to you in South Africa. Mr. Silaho, are you there?
Dr. Weston, there is no audio from your
Weston,
end.
can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, great.
Okay, you may need to, your voice is a bit low, but I also wanted to ask you the same question, that beyond this declaration by the global body, as an African, what does this actually mean to ordinary Africans who have read over and over the history of slave trade and what it means for our history, what it means for our status, as it were, today in the global affair? What does this mean for the ordinary African?
Am I loud?
It's still a bit low. Your voice is still a bit low. I don't know if it has to do with the positioning of your microphone.
What about here?
A little bit better.
Okay, we
Can
can
you
hear you.
confirm?
It's a bit better. It's a bit better. Please go ahead, Dr. Weston.
Okay, thanks. I think symbolically it is significant. Because our struggle is against forgetfulness. Our struggle is the struggle for memory.
Please, if you're not speaking, can you mute your microphone? For those joining us, if you're not speaking, please mute your mic. Thank you. Dr. Weston, please go ahead.
Yes, I was saying a struggle by any people anywhere in the world, first and foremost, is about memory. It's about remembrance. And it's against forgetfulness. So it's imperative to remember where we're coming from as Black people. The atrocities of slavery, which we still feel to date. It's imperative that generations that came many, many years after get to learn what happened in the past. And therefore, that this discussion is still happening and at the highest level of the UN is significant. But it's symbolic, very symbolic, in the sense that you can still see that there's reluctance to accept that as the greatest, or if not one of the greatest crimes against humanity. 52 countries abstained from that vote, and 3, voted against, and one of which is the United States of America. So that's also significant. We have to take note of that there's still reluctance to accept the atrocities of slavery and the need for reparations. And we must add that it's not about money, not about dollars and cents. The damage that slavery caused to Black people is incalculable. You can't put a price tag on that. But as it is, as far as restorative justice is concerned, it's imperative that we acknowledge the crimes that were perpetrated before against Black people, and that we make a commitment as members of the human race that should never ever debase and dehumanize one another. The most unfortunate thing is that slavery still obtains to date as we speak in one form or another. The exploitation of African countries owing to neocolonialism, imperialism, that's a form of slavery. We still experience those things today.
All right, Dr. Weston.
So I think in that sense, we acknowledge the discourse, but there's still work to be done.
Well, you talked about consequences. I would like to cross over to Accra, there where Mr. Mawuni is on standby. I mean, the UN may have recognized this largely on a moral ground. Do you think there will be any enforceable consequences at the end of it? Mr. Mawuni, this is for you.
To my colleagues out there, and I view one of the finest brains when it comes to the area of migration, in the person of Andrea, who joined the line from Germany. And as a result of an invitation extended to her, she has a great interest when it comes to migration and migration-related issues. And of course, with this issue of the UN resolution that is passed this August, or this March 2026. So, yes, so you see, when it comes to the issue of legalities with the UN, the UN resolution is a law on itself, which most people usually forget that once a resolution is passed, it takes an international framework, okay, that is binding on actors. But the issue here I want us to look at is that people actually are mixing the issue of slavery and slave trade. The two are not the same.
How do you mean?
You see, when people talk about slavery, okay, we are looking of exploiting people, okay, in a way that they ought not to work for. And slavery is the trade. The trade is the slavery, okay? But the slavery itself, the trade is different with the act of selling somebody to another person and letting that person work. But what actually here we are looking at is the act that the colonial masters, subjected the human race, most especially from Africa and other countries too. So let's get that facts right. And I noticed that a lot of people are getting it wrong. Okay, so it's binding on the actors who signed to this resolution. And you notice with keen interest that almost all the Schengen states, including some European states that are complicit, to this slave trade did not sign to the resolution. They absented themselves, which is very bad. You see, acknowledging and moving forward, let's put all these things back as history and move forward. Then some people decide that, oh, you know what, we're not going to vote. Yes, we witness it, but we're not going to vote. So you look at it, the few people that actually went head to head against this resolution is 4 countries: Argentina, Israel, the United States, and then some other countries. It's very sad. Okay, so legally binding, yes, to some extent, okay, the UN can enforce it. Okay. But as to whether the enforcement will take precedence or not is another issue that we actually need to discuss. And I'm sure maybe going forward, we look at it. Right. Yes, but UN resolutions are basically laws that are binding on partners.
All right. Of course, there are laws that are binding. But let me cross over to the US, where we have Jasmine. And of course, we understand that she has been in the forefront of efforts to get this recognition. And the question I want to ask you, Jasmine, is, of course, now that the UN has recognized this, even though we know that there are some powerful countries that have chosen to stay away, how do you think that global systems will confront this history honestly? Because there is a difference between declaration and real structural changes that will have impact on the lives of ordinary citizens of the affected countries. From your own perspective, as one who has been championing this very recognition by the United Nations, what do you think that going forward, the global system will, face this recognition honestly, bearing in mind countries that have chosen to not to back this declaration? Jasmine.
Yeah, so I think that's a really important question because there's a couple of things that people need to know about this resolution. First of all, the title. The title is that it is a declaration of the trafficking and chattel enslavement of Africans as the gravest crime against humanity. Every word in that framing is actually very important for understanding the conversation because by describing the crime as the gravest, we're actually capturing the gravity of how this institution of chattel enslavement broke the world. It's not about who suffered most. And I want to be clear that racialized chattel slavery was the breaking point where the world's transition from local feudal regimes to this modern global system of racial capitalism is something that structurally transformed the world for all people through racialized regimes of labor, property, territory, capital, sovereignty, which all continue to determine our life today. And I think that's important because gravest it doesn't just make this conversation about it being a regular crime against humanity in the sense that Durban had already done that. Durban had already determined that the trafficking and chattel enslavement of Africans was a crime against humanity. But this resolution takes it a step further because it recognizes it as a crime of exceptional magnitude, unprecedented in its structural impact, and something that's comparable only to itself. So for people who are wondering how this resolution is different than Durban, Durban named the crime, but not the structural impact and the systems. So this resolution moves us from this moral condemnation to now a structural and a collective geopolitical analysis of systems that continue to hurt everybody. I think that's really key because we're getting at a structural problem. And by having the full backing of 123 countries, it shows that we are all clear about how the system of chattel enslavement not only began through the African body, African captivity, but it has mutated and evolved into many other systems that still thrive today. And I want to correct a framing that I think a lot of people do get confused about. When we're talking about chattel enslavement, we're talking about the idea that African identity effectively becomes the grounds for enslaving people. It is through us, African people, that the category of non-human people is created. That's not something that existed. So we can't conflate that with every other form of slavery prior to that time, because that's not how it was practiced. And I know a lot of people tend to conflate all forms of slavery as being the same. They're not. We're talking about chattel enslavement, when you reduce human beings to property. And I think it's important to note that in pre the 15th century, you had slavery in which people did have debt bondage, or they were prisoners of war. That form of slavery still allowed people to participate in society as regular people. They were still able to be covered and included in common law. However, when you have chattel enslavement of Africans, chattel enslavement becomes the governance system of African people. And so we are separated into a society where we are not seen as human. We're not able to go to the same schools. We are not even protected by the laws. So if to make this more concrete, during this time, I would say in America, because I'm speaking as a Black American, there are animals that have legal protections, okay? So it is illegal for you to have sex with animals, right?
Oh.
Those laws don't apply to Black people at this time. So it is not illegal for you to rape your property. It's not illegal for you to use Black women's bodies for your pleasure. Rape. The Black woman's womb at this time literally becomes a middle passage for creating enslavement in perpetuity for Black people. And so I just wanted to underscore that, because I don't think people understand what makes this type of slavery different than what existed. And I want to be clear that the resolution title says trafficking and chattel enslavement, not the slave trade, for deliberate reasons. We don't call it a slave trade because this was not a consensual business enterprise in which there were two willing parties who were coming to the table. What happened on the shores of Africa across the Atlantic was a military operation that was the conditions of warfare in which African leaders and African people at that time had to contend with. So
All
I
right,
wouldn't
Jasmine.
even consider this. Thank you.
Well, let me cross over to Mr. I do have a follow-up question to that, but because of time, Mr. Mamuni, there we are seeing current migration flows. I mean, it is nonstop. We are hearing a lot of our youngsters, young people, trying to get to Europe and all of that. Do you see this as a continuation of historical injustice, as it is, Mr. Mamuni? We can hear you, Mr. Mooney. Can you hear me? Please check your audio. All right, while we wait for you to sort that out, let's cross over to Johannesburg. Dr. Weston, with some countries acknowledging this resolution, how do you think this will, affect international relationship between the Western world and African countries? Please, your audio also.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Yes, this resolution is not legally binding. It's not legally binding. It requires political will to implement. And therefore, the discussions will continue for many, many decades to come. Because the US has historically argued that they don't owe Black people anything. No reparations, no compensation, nothing, because according to them, slave trade and slavery was legal. So it was nothing untoward. They can't be held accountable for what was legal. That's the perverse argument they're advancing. And in that perverse clique, we have countries like the Netherlands also that are denying responsibility for atrocities as a result of slavery and the benefits that they've enjoyed and they continue enjoying. And therefore, Africa will continue pushing, because it's not a hierarchy of crimes against humanity, as some people want to put it. It's not. It's not. But it's therefore mentioned that this was the gravest crime against humanity. How to engage in the selling and buying of human beings and reducing them to things without any rights whatsoever. It can't be. So it's at the apex. But we'll continue having the discussion from the grassroots, and hopefully countries like Ghana, countries in the Caribbean, and civil society organizations in the US and in the diaspora and on the African continent will continue pushing this narrative, this conversation. Because as I said earlier, it's about memory, it's about remembrance, and it's about dignity, and it's about recognition that the inequalities we continue facing. We're talking about, young Africans ever dying while crossing the Mediterranean Sea to the west. These are the after effects of some of these atrocities. So we continue paying the price.
Indeed. Well, Mr. Mumuni, I don't know if your audio is back now, but you work on migration. How directly can we connect today's irregular migration trends to the historical legacy of slavery and colonial exploitation?
All right, so this is it. When you look at irregular migration, okay, we are looking at a variance of it, okay? People that had to travel from through the Mediterranean, it's an irregular migration. People that breach their visa condition, they easily become irregular migrants. So when we are talking of irregular migration, we have to look at it from different angles. It's not just about going through the Mediterranean and other channels to Europe or America, through Mexico and the rest of them. We are looking at different type of irregular migration, whether or not the person has a visa, went to Europe or America, and his visa condition has been breached, he definitely becomes an irregular migrant because his condition is never the same. And that is one thing different to saying that, okay, during the time of, during enslavement, people were sold either willingly or out of their, not agreeing to being sold out to the slave masters and then being abused at the other end or at the other side. So the two are two different school of thought or two different category of migration pattern. One is a transactional migration, and then irregular migration is something that the person willingly had to travel, to other jurisdiction to make ends meet. And don't forget, most of this irregular migration has to do with economic migration. And when it comes to slavery, it's a different thing altogether that we are looking at. So at the end of the day, one has to pay for it, okay, that people were sold not based on their own will and being abused, okay, by the slave masters, and then when it comes to irregular, of course, it's the migrant himself who found himself at the destination country and then decide to live there for economic reason. So the two are not the same. Let's try to always do this thing right so that we don't mix the two. Once you begin to mix the two, we will lose focus. And our concern here must be ensuring that people migrate legally. And let me put it on record. Okay, migration in itself is not a negative thing, as people sometimes tries to, let us believe. Migration is a positive thing, okay? And then, the Western part or the global North try to let it look like, oh, these people are coming, they are bad. If you look at indentured migration, in the case of Germany, for instance, okay, that people had to be contracted to come and work in Germany, is a positive thing. And so because of that, we've seen in several countries whereby they try to, legalize migration, indentured migration for people to go and work. So migration is a big deal, but however, let's try to ensure that we educate our people, our youth, to understand that there's no problem traveling to seek for greener pasture or for economic reason you are traveling abroad. We see a lot of people having to travel from the United Kingdom, from the United States to other Western countries or to Australia and other countries to make it. It's not different from what we are doing. We are only confronted with visa restriction, making it very difficult for our youth to travel. So the two are not the same, if I should put it.
Thank you very much for that clarification. And of course, it's worth emphasizing that the story of mankind is generally the story of migration. But let me cross over to Jasmine one more time from in the US. Of course, your organization and your own personal effort have been geared towards this very day. But the question I want to ask next is, now that we are here, how would you and your organization be helping African governments translate this very historical recognition into present-day benefits for ordinary citizens, especially young people, since our conversation is now shifting towards migration flows, which involves young people largely? Jasmine.
Yeah, I think African youth are going to be probably one of the most important constituencies of the reparations movement as it moves forward. We know that Africa will have the largest and the youngest population in the coming years. So this is really the time to make sure that young people are able to be engaged in these conversations. As you can see, things that happen at the UN, they tend to be very high level. Some people would say too elitist to even reach the average person. And so I think it's going to be a necessary bridge that you build between governments and the everyday person, so that this conversation that's happening in the UN is something that students and youth are able to talk about in their own circles, in their own spaces, and making sure that we actually bring young people to the table, because typically those spaces are dominated by senior people, men, and you don't have a lot of women and youth at those tables. So I think first and foremost, you got to make sure that that bridge is happening. Second, it's going to be important for governments to understand what it is that people want to see reparations do for them. If reparations doesn't resonate to the average person, this is just a high level elite conversation that doesn't have a meaning. So I think, you know, you have to have a lot of work happening at the local level with people. That could be town halls, that could be listening sessions. I think you need a space for people to actually share their vision for what reparations will look like, recognizing that it's not going to look the same in every country or every region because all of our histories and our current geopolitical context are very different. So reparations is going to have a customized and different look in every place, but that doesn't mean that as global African people, we can't come together and have a unified political agenda.
Thank you very much. Dr. Weston. Dr. Weston, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, even though, of course, from my end, your voice seemed to be very, very far away. I don't know if it's the same for others, but we can manage with what we have from you. The question I also want to ask again is, organizations such as the African Union, the ball is now in their court, as has been said. What do you think they should be doing with this very declaration going forward?
Well, African Union as an intergovernmental body has not covered itself in glory, and it hasn't articulated matters that affect the African people quite robustly as it ought to. And therefore, I would give them some benefit of doubt that going forward, they would raise robustly such issues with the seriousness that they deserve. But usually they capitulate when they push back from some of these very powerful countries. They capitulate. They don't really stand their ground. What I wish to say is this, that let's not get into legalese. Remember what I said, that America and even in South Africa, apartheid was legal. So don't get into legalese. Who is traveling legally and who's not traveling legally? You are getting into the hands of imperialists who commit mass atrocities and invoke law to defend their mass atrocities. So don't get into legalese. Who is regular and who is not irregular? These are push factors that are still haunting the African continent. Because if Africa worked optimally, that if there were no inequalities between Africa and the global north and other countries, if Africa was not hollowed out institutionally and as far as its natural resources were concerned, there will be no need for anybody to leave the African continent and search for greener pastures. African people remain on the African continent. So there's a connection between transatlantic slave trade, slavery, and Africa's dire economic situation. There is. It's still haunting us. That's what we mean by the enduring legacy of slave trade. Don't try to dichotomize these two issues. And therefore, let's be crystal clear that these people are moving, no matter how desperate they are moving because the continent does not work. Of course, there are internal factors as to why the situation is what it is: poverty, inequalities, civil war, weak institutions. And there are also external factors: interference by international bodies, multinational corporations, former colonial powers, and imperial forces in Africa. We understand those things. So let's not invoke the law and legalists. We're actually playing to the hands of imperialists and slave trade beneficiaries. You're not going to win when you take that route. That's my take.
Well, Mr. Mumuni, do you have a response to Dr. Weston's comment before I throw a question at you?
Yes, so I think Doug is misconceptualizing my discourse to mean that, I'm trying to give, credence to one, but they are the same thing, Yes, we understand that in Africa, our issue comes down to, issue of economic survival, if I should put it that way. But the fact of the issue is that when you want to compare, the previous, that is what Ghana has actually championed by getting this resolution passed, it has to do with migration, which you ask, and then the slavery. And how do the youth who still migrate? So I try to draw a distinction, between the two, so that we can have a clear picture of what is actually happening now and what happened before, because migration is something that is inherent in men, whether previously or now. The youth will still migrate. People migrate not necessarily because they have to migrate to go for economic reason. They want to explore other side of the world. It's something that is normal. But when I try to draw distinction between the two, is for us to appreciate that, yes, the youth still wants to make those moves. And by moving, it's for economic reason. Which Doc himself just confirmed that, there will always be that reason.
Well, Mr. Mumuni, let me come in here at this point, because you talked about economy, Dr. Weston has talked about economy. Shouldn't we now focus more on fixing internal governance, and economic systems first, instead of perhaps prioritizing this resolution and recognition by the UN and other global bodies?
That is exactly the problem. I don't know if it was your station or another station called me. We had a discussion. You see, African leaders need to understand that once ever youth want to travel abroad, it's because they notice that the system is working there. What is African leaders doing to ensure that we have a working system? You can also come to terms that we have issues here in Africa that, don't be surprised that my uncle even knows your uncle, that type of a thing. But we need to actually let the system work in Africa, whereby, no one influences anything. We have our basics right. Because if somebody wakes up and he cannot get a 3 square meal, all he's thinking is, where should I go? And yet African leaders travels, they school abroad, they have all the knowledge that requires to change the paradigm in Africa, and yet they are not doing much. So I don't know whether it's a deliberate, if I should say so, that African leaders themselves wants to see African youth suffers, which I'm sure when in our discussion, we come to appreciate it in terms of Nigerian situation.
Let me just hold you there, Mr. Moon. I'm so sorry. Let me just hold you there because of time. Jasmine wanted to also react to your response to Dr. Weston. Jasmine, please go ahead briefly.
No, I just wanted to say, I don't think we have the luxury of choosing one over the other, whether it be reparations now or fixing the current systems first, because reparations requires that we are building new systems so that we can actually exercise self-determination and sovereignty. So without new systems, we actually just end up having good intentions that get absorbed in systems that are already not working for us. So reparations could either reinforce existing financial structures or be used to reshape and break through them. So I think the fundamental question here is whether reparations would circulate back in the same global financial structures, or would it really be the breakthrough and the world remaking project that we want it to
Now,
be?
do you think it will?
I think it can be. It's all about self-determination. Reparations is the vehicle, one of the first vehicles that we have for Black people to collectively exercise self-determination and to decide what is required by the injuring perpetrators to make this crime right by them, to atone for that crime. And so there's an opportunity here to say, here is how you have harmed me, and here is how we can make it right. This gives countries a chance to look at reparations as a part of reparative state building.
Indeed. Usman.
Okay. Yes, I want to go over to South Africa one more time because I think we've been talking about reparations and all that. And when we read the history of slave trade, as it were, and even human trafficking, as it were, there are always the local collaborators who make all of this possible. And now that we are talking about UN recognizing this as a crime, where does this leave those who actually contributed from the home countries where all of these activities happen? I see Jasmine's hands up. I think it's an interesting question to her, but I would want Mr. Wilson to actually respond to this first.
Dr.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, go ahead, please.
Sorry for the image, it's not there, but I hope the voice is clear.
Yes, it's better now.
Very clear. Go ahead.
Well, collaborators, this were ill-informed, as it were. Ill-informed traditional leaders across Africa that the merchants of human slave trade, exploited. I would put it like that. I'm not absolving them, but I think we recognize the role they played, but there were not really important people in this chain. What I would invite us to focus on is multinational corporations, and they have admitted in the past that they have benefited from this egregious crime, and they're still minting millions of US dollars, whichever currency you want to use, as a result of this very dastardly legacy. And therefore, we have to hold them to account, as opposed to looking for some elderly people in Ghana or Senegal, or I don't know where they are. That would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. It won't take us far. So I think the bigger picture, countries and nations that bore the moral responsibility, and they know themselves, we know them, and who are opposed to reparations, for atonement, for acknowledgement of crimes that were committed in the past, we must put them in our sights, as opposed to this diversionary discussion about the role that Black people played in this and what have you. I don't think you could stand up to imperialists, really. You couldn't. As a traditional chief, where could you get the wherewithal to stand up to them? That's my take.
All right. Well, Jasmine, please go ahead.
I'll be quick and just say that when we hear this question, we have to understand that it is one of deflection from the people who are accountable, and it's a distortion of history in a way that diminishes European accountability. And by doing so, we actually are participating in this divisive strategy of enslavers at the time to actually take us away from understanding the larger system of who is responsible and who actually controlled it, who actually profited from it. So I just wanted to make sure that we are clear that what African leaders had done under the conditions of warfare does not absolve European enslavers from their ownership of the system.
Indeed. As we round off this conversation, I would like to give a last question to Mr. Mumuni. Now that we are here, what should be the next step by African leaders, by Africans themselves?
Okay, so my take is that Africa needs to revisit its plan by going back to the drawing board, looking at the system that we designed for ourselves, because the system that we are currently practicing, if I say system, our governance system needs a revisit. It's not about democracy or voting, but it's about putting the system, robust so that the system will work for the interest of the African people, particularly the youth who are in majority across Africa. If African leaders are able to go back to the drawing board, look at the excesses and the minuses to see how best Africa can develop by ensuring that the system works for the interest of the masses and not for the interest of the political elite and the political class and their families. That will work for the interest of the African youth rather than, trying to ensure that they amass wealth for their generation, leaving the middle class and the poor Africans struggling to survive life by thinking of migrating to other countries to work. We want to see African leaders ensure that the African youth travel for holiday, just like the global south traveling to Africa for holiday during summer.
Okay. Thank you very much. As we round up, Jasmine, let's have your last word so that we can go over to Mr. Weston.
Yes, I would just say that reparations is about remaking the world after a world-breaking tragedy. And that tragic event is commonly misunderstood as something that just impacted African people, but it's something that affects us all. And so I'm looking forward to this conversation growing, not just in diplomatic spaces, but even at people's dinner tables, so that now we can start to have a more robust conversation about what we want the world to look like and what we need to do to get there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jasmine. Dr. Weston.
Yes, I think we ought to have these conversations going forward. And if we don't speak for ourselves, no one will speak for us. Because as Black people, we understand, we appreciate the pain of this odious legacy, and we shouldn't be wrong foot, by individuals who have benefited from this gravest crime against humanity. You must remain focused. We may not get reparations tomorrow, next year, 10 years from now, but the fact of the matter is that we are not going to trivialize loss of lives and dignity that this slave trade and slavery engendered on the African continent and in the diaspora, in the Caribbean, in the Americas. We will not get tired of asking the tough questions and for accountability. We ought to do that. We owe it to ourselves, not to anybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Weston Silaho. Of course, we've had a very extensive conversation on this subject matter, but unfortunately, this is where we'll have to wrap up the first segment of this show. And I want to use this opportunity to say a sincere thank you to Mr. Mumini Yakubu Nambe, who is a migration expert and legal consultant in Ghana. Once again, Dr. Weston Silaho, an international relations scholar from the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa. Of course, having joined us also, joining us also was Jasmine Meekins, founder of the Reparations Imagination Laboratory. And of course, she's a dedicated Pan-Africanist, as her conversation, her contribution this morning has shown. Thank you very much, gentlemen and lady, for your contributions. We sincerely thank you.
Yeah, thank you so very much for having us.
Thank you. Ivo.
Thank you.
All right, if you're just joining on radio or streaming on YouTube and Facebook, this is Citizens Hour, and we are coming to you live from West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM Dakar, the capital of Senegal. We have been examining the significance of the UN's recognition of the slave trade as a crime against humanity. Usman.
Yes, in the second half of the show, we shift our focus now to the energy challenges facing Africa's most populous nation. As the darkness persists, we look for solutions to Nigeria's power struggle. Imo.
Well, to help us dissect this, we are joined by an energy expert, Mr. Olabode Showumi, and I hope I am waiting for him to join us. And of course, we do have Dr. Paul Alaje, Chief Economist at SPM Professional, based in Abuja, Nigeria. Thank you so much, Dr. Alaje, for joining us, and it's good to see you. Happy New Year's.
Happy New Year. Thank you so very much for having me, my brother. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we can continue to talk forever about the past situation in Nigeria. And I mean, one will always ask why Nigeria, the giant of Africa, is still facing blackout, even after the 2013, reforms in the power sector. Why is the blackout still worrying Nigerians? Why is it something that we can't fix? Successive governments have come, it's still the same story. What is the problem really?
Well, I think, thank you so very much. I think the challenge with Nigeria power system is the foundation. The foundation be destroyed. What can the righteous do? So we need to review the foundation. As we speak, our energy target is about 10,000 megawatts. But what is actually required for us as a nation is over 50,000 megawatts. We have seen that as we speak in Nigeria, we are currently distributing less than 5,000 megawatts to homes, factory, and so on and so forth. Only recently, the current president had said that power should be decentralized to different subnational. In Nigeria, we have 36 plus the Federal Capital Territory. So I can say, quote and unquote, we have 37 of them. The challenge is from the beginning, which is generation. We're not generating enough, even though successive administration feels 10,000 megawatts is enough. And I can tell you that for those of us on this call this morning, we're able to nod our head, we're able to raise our neck, we're able to shift from one side to the other because we have energy. Energy is central to every development. Call it human development, call it economic development, national development. The one that lacks energy will certainly beg those who do not lack energy. So the challenge with us is that we are not generating enough. Also, weak infrastructure for transmission. Oftentimes, we hear and we have seen in reports that the transmission plant of Nigeria has collapsed. And we have seen this, I think, in 2024, a number of them more than 10, 2025, even though that reduced compared to 2024. 2026, we have also seen the collapse of the transmission company. Transmission will then lead to the final one, which is distribution. Distribution is what empowers factories, energy in homes, and so on and so forth. So while we have distributed 2013 reforms into generation with the GENCOs, a number of them, they've divided Nigeria into different states. Some took 2 states, some took 4. But for Lagos, for instance, our 2 GENCOs, which is the Ikeja Electric and Eko Electric for the Lagos Island. Some other places, we have seen 1 GENCO manage more than 1 state. So, but GENCOs are to generate, then we have the DISCOs. So the DISCOs, I beg your pardon, is one that distributed, and we have DISCO in Lagos, 2 of them. So DISCO distribution company, while largely, federal government still control the transmission line. For me, if we say that we want to have a reform, we need to bring those that are competent, who can provide this service. We saw the reform in 2013, which was, of course, to a large extent criticized by energy experts and economists in the country. Why? Who were the people that power were given to? To our best of our knowledge, some of them are not competent. Some of them do not have, not all, but some of them do not have the competence required and the capital. Energy business requires a lot of capital. Whether Nigerian authority is able to provide, those who participated in the privatization were able to provide required capital is a different kettle of fish. What I can tell you from report, many of them are not able. In fact, they even got some support from the federal government of Nigeria. That's on one side. Another issue, revenue the government collected or received from the proceeds of the sales of this energy. As a partner in the business, the monies were used to settle labor issues largely. They might use the remaining for something largely. We use it to settle labor. The question is, if you had not sold this power plant, would you not have settled your staff? Would you not have settled labor? Which is a big issue here. So there is not enough money given to that sector. So people that took over, they felt that they've already prepared the grave. Theirs is just to put the body in the ground. And that is why till today, 2026, Nigeria, 230 million people, human beings with brains, we see talk about energy. Meanwhile, countries with smaller population, not limited to Bahrain, not limited to United Arab Emirates. They have to a large extent solved their problem. And I know that even, what is it called now? Paul Kagame's country is also doing largely trying to get energy supply. I think what's his name of this country now? Paul Kagame's Rwanda, largely trying to solve critical energy challenges. I don't know if there will be time, but I will tell you that rather what we should do first is what we are doing now. Different states should be empowered, partner with private sector to provide key and much needed energy resource from distribution to transmission and eventually to distribution. But that's not what we have seen in the case of Nigeria.
All right. Thank you very much for this very elaborate, background to this conversation, because I'm very sure that every single Nigerian listening to this program or watching us right now clearly understands everything that you have said. And it's very instructive that you have said something that is very important, that power or energy is central to everything that we do in our modern society. And over the years, it will appear like darkness has been weaponized against the Nigerian people, because based on what you've said, power is, you have generation, you have transmission, then you have distribution. These are key pillars. And from what you have said right now, it means that over the years, if there has been targeted programs by government at all levels, including the private sector, beginning from 2013, when Goodluck Jonathan decided to, privatize. And then if there had been investment, key investment in these three key pillars, we shouldn't be here today, because as I speak with you, I'm speaking from Abuja, and I can tell you that I had to power my generator from morning so that I wouldn't have any power issues right here. And this is the same for most people right now as we speak in Abuja. What exactly do you think is the problem of the power sector in Nigeria as it were today? What exactly? Because a lot of people, it has become like the more you see, the less you understand.
Well, insufficiency is the central problem to the Nigerian power Nigerian power sector. One, insufficiency in terms of output. That we are not generating enough. Insufficiency. So does that mean that
we can't develop the capacity to generate enough?
We can. But you ask me what are the problems. I wish I can talk about the possible solution too. So that
we will definitely talk about solutions. That's why we are here.
So the key problem here, summarize it in one word: insufficiency. Insufficiency in the volume of our outputs. That's power generation. Two, insufficiency in modern, what do we call it now? Equipment for transmission. Three, insufficiency of energy security. In places where we have power lines and transmission lines, insurgents may go there and blow them up. Some evil people may also go there and vandalize the power plants. So there are not enough security. People who are Nigerians who are supposed to love their country, they just go there and just steal some things. So insufficiency. Lastly, when it comes to distribution, some areas that required, what's it called now? Some energy, but because maybe they are low income environment, they are bounded, they are grouped into band Ds, band Cs. So some may have energy 4 hours a day. One of the respondents in a research report claimed they are 4 hours a week. Some 4 hours, 20 hours minimum a day. That's band A. So those guys pretty much enjoy light. Then we have the next band to that, I think about 16 to 18 hours, band B. But we have those at the downtrodden where you have majority of the people. Not my word. World Bank says about 140 million Nigerians living below poverty line. Where do we expect them to be? In band A or the band Ds? So those are the downtrodden that we talk about. But to distribute this light, wait, if light is that much, why should we ration it? The problem of insufficiency. Are there organizations that can help us? Are there bodies that can help us? Are there nations with large population that have solved this problem? Iran, it took our opposing nation to blow up Iran power plant. Even during the war, there was light. Nigeria is not going through any war. I never prayed for it. No missile exploded on our land, at least from February 28th. But I can tell you, the impact of war in terms of high prices in PMS, we are paying for it. Diesel for our factory, we are paying for it. Now, energy costs, because according to His Excellency, Mr. Minister, he said there is scarcity of gas. He said that's the reason why it's beyond their control. And gas costs, is it increasing or reducing? Because of energy crisis in a nation. My recent publication on some journals reveal that Nigeria, as of today, still has the largest output of energy resource in Africa. We have others such as Libya, Algeria, Angola, but Nigeria dominates. But can you imagine that because there is a crisis in another country or in another region, Nigeria that produces, Nigeria where some of these things are extracted, and we also have refinery, we also have the NLNG, but sadly, honestly and sincerely, prices are going up to the point the manufacturing sector is affected. And you see, it's another conversation by the time we start extraying the implication of energy shortage. Do you know that energy shortage contributes to Japa syndrome in Nigeria? I don't know if you're in Nigeria, you know what they call Japa. Japa means people leaving their country, just want to run to another place. So where are they running to? To be security in front of a lift and stand for 10 hours? Nigeria blessed with all resource, including lithium.
Dr. Elijah, let me come in here. Take you on the 2025 federal budget, which allocated 1.38 trillion naira to the power sector. And of course, with the bulk of this directed to capital projects such as grid expansion, which you talked about. And of lately, the Aso Villa itself was disconnected from the national grid and hooked on to a solar farm, which is over 1 billion naira. Does this tell you that we do have poor governance in that country?
First of all, if you look at the 2025 budget, you said majority of the money go to power projects. I don't know if you saw the circular by the federal government that says that, sorry, we cannot meet up with 70%. 70% of the capital projects in the year. Therefore, we will run it over to 2026 budget. I don't know what the date is in Dakar. But I can tell you what the date is in Nigeria. Saturday, 28th March.
It's the same day, Dr.
Nigeria budget. No, maybe Dakar is 3 days ahead or 3 days behind.
It's the same.
28th March. Nigeria is yet to pass 2026 budget. Meanwhile, government have said, well, let's allow 2025 budget to run till 31st of what's it called now? 31st of March. 2026. But as I speak, the assembly is yet to pass the budget. We only have Monday and Tuesday. Wednesday is April Fool. But I want to believe that will not be fooled.
well, what is the problem investing in energy farm? I mean, a lot of countries are resorting to that. I mean, for instance, Senegal here and some other countries in the sub-region. Why can't we look at that sector of electricity? We are so blessed with wind. We're blessed with sunlight.
If Senegal is investing in energy, I can predict the future of Senegal. If you're a person, you see, economics is so simple that the course or a course of study that is close to economics is medicine. If you have infection and you refuse to treat it, it's a matter of time. It may get into your kidney. Economics has made it so easy that you can predict the future of a nation that don't plan for its future. There is no future without energy. So nations that are investing on energy are certainly preparing for certain future, for some kind of future. For Nigeria, why is it difficult? Are we looking at the factories? Is it necessary for education? Our engineers, are we thinking that they are the one we want them, are they the one we are expecting to build our roads? If they are expecting Nigerian engineers to build our roads, you will make energy available. If they are expecting people that study electrical and electronics to be the one that we make our television, our mobile phones, our laptops. You make energy available. But it's accepted. That university education is not compulsory. Don't worry. You can go abroad, come back to Nigeria, or manufacture abroad, send to Nigeria. Even if you expect that our health sector will function, you will make energy available. So that it will be available. Hold on, sir. Okay. It will be available during surgery in hospitals. But that's not the case. So nations that want to be independent. See, independence is a matter of having your national anthem. If you are not economically independent, to a large extent, if you are not, to a large extent, but the case we see is that the investment that should come from government is slim, is small. Now, having private sector engagement is another thing. In what do we want to have private sector engagement? One, there must be transparency, because private sector will help drive a lot of things. But there must be transparency, there must be fairness, there must be competitiveness for private sector to hold to. You recall that in 2023, 2024, we were told to remove subsidy on energy. The government did that drastically. And when that was done, we saw energy was put into bands, band A, band B, band C. And the cost of energy has since increased. With that increment, can we say that the energy output has sporadically increased? Again, I go back to the real issue, which is shortage of output, shortage of resources, and so on and so forth. So there is issue investing. The question is, do we have a roadmap for what the end result should be like? Do we have the political will to see it through? Do we have the private investors who may not necessarily be the friends of those in government? Can we call General Electric? How did you get it? What did you do? What kind of investment can you put in our country? How long will it take us? Can state governors who are now having more money because of subsidy removal, because of removal of subsidy on exchange rates, can we call these state governors? Can you partner with XYZ organization, international organization, so that energy can be ubiquitous in Nigeria? Let me tell you this. The development of Nigeria lies on the states, any subnational that gets energy correctly. As a matter of fact, if that state can take the pain to combine availability of energy with security, it will not matter where the state is located. Nigeria will move there.
We understand some states like Abia are doing great in electricity generation.
But look at Abia GDP. Look at Abia growth. Was it the way it was when the previous governor was there? That proves the point. Was it the same? So energy always moves towards growth, and it also drives development.
Are you concerned that Dr. Elijah, sorry, are you concerned now, because I asked a question earlier and I wanted a straight answer from you, and now that the government has abandoned the national grid and put the capital, the powerhouse, Aso Villa, on power,
yes, I forgot to answer that
the solar power. What does this say about the government? Because people were happy initially that yes, they are also on the national grid. So when it fails, they feel the pain that the people are feeling. But in this case,
I have a lot of worries. Honestly, I have a lot of worries that happened. It shows that we are not leading by example. It shows that so long as we can afford it and it's state money, no problems. So if government of Nigeria wants to lead, the same thing, I've seen many African leaders drive vehicles when they can produce vehicles in their nation. The nation we want to be like, you see their convoy may not be only the vehicle in their country, but it will be predominant. So now that government can afford it, what happens to the downtrodden that are the electorates, the real people with power that gave their power to those in government in trust? Has the trust not been breached? So here is my response. I will tell you that I have huge concern, because when the impact of darkness or absence of electricity hits the people, it may not be the same for those in government.
All right, Dr. Latte, I just have a follow-up question, because it's similar to what Imo has asked about the presidential villa going off grid. And then relying now more on the solar power which of course we've seen the largest solar farm in Nigeria in the villa. It's even visible for you to see if you are driving around villa. Very recently, the governor of Niger State, which incidentally is referred to as Power State, because it hosts the Kainji Dam, the Jeba Dam, Shiroro Dam, and even the Zungeru hydroelectric dam, which supposedly, of course, the state is supposed to be the power source of the nation. But the state has been in perpetual darkness for quite a lot of time now. I'm sure you're aware of this. We came back recently from holiday from Bida, which is one of the towns in the state. And I can tell you that for days, they go about 4 days without electricity in that particular side of this. But the governor, in a recent town hall meeting, told the gathering, to their surprise, that government cannot provide electricity for every citizen, because according to him, that even the state house, the government house in Niger State is also going off grid. He mentioned other key agencies such as the Water Board, that they are going off national grid. Is this a new trend of abandoning Nigerians to their fate by those who are squarely responsible for providing energy, which you have said, and a lot of other experts have also said, is central to not just economic development, but to the well-being of citizens?
Well, as a matter of fact, those in government should know that very soon they will join the populace. As a matter of fact, I've seen former governors who, after leaving office, their relevance are diminishing significantly. But I've also seen some that remain relevant. What matters is what they did for their people. We have seen that over time, some individuals in authority have said energy is not rocket science. Is what they will do in short period of time. It's a trend that is going on. And let me also say that Niger State will not be last state to say they are going off grid. But what we know is that you can go off grid for administrative purposes. That is not what is important. Until the solar panels we are installing everywhere can power factories, can power industries, then we are just joking. Because that grid, those things we are doing, there will be no enough factory in the nation. There will be no enough employment in the nation. Then you see that even though you install power, it's not sufficient anywhere, any day. My advice will be, instead of spending money alone to install grid, can government afford to install the same for all citizens? The answer is no. So, but can we provide central power either through hydro or gas for Nigerians, especially for businesses and for factories, so that they can employ people? The same government will be worried about high unemployment, be worried about high poverty. But where we are supposed to pay attention, things that help reduce significantly the number of people that are poor to those who are unemployed, we are not investing in them. And these are implications. Implication is hunger, poverty, and deprivation. So to my mind, it's a new trend and it calls for a lot of worries. That government says that it cannot provide electricity for everybody, then is to a large extent very worrisome. In spite of new revenues that is coming into state covers, one would expect that what we take priority are 5 things: energy, road, education, health, and security.
So where are these investments going into, Dr. Ladia? Where are these investments going into?
If you ask where the investment are going to, the question is, are they even sufficient? Because most states and the federal government have 70% of their budget in recurrent expenditure. And capital expenditure is investment. Recurrent is not investment, it's consumption. Payment of salaries, spending some on politics. So are we going to get liberated? Capital expenditure is the real thing that can deliver us from global economic quagmire. But the capex is not seeing sufficiently what we ought to see.
But how is this portraying Nigeria in the global light? I mean, when you talk about sectors like energy, Nigeria is always the top to have epileptic power supply or a critical sector. We saw what happened in South Africa with Eskom and the rest of them. They were able to get up and still, meet the demands of the population. Why can't we adopt maybe that model that they did in that country?
Well, how this portray Nigeria in a simple term is an underdeveloped nation, or undeveloped nation. That's how it portrays us. in spite of all the professors, brains, smart people in energy sector, knowledgeable people, if you don't have energy, whatever you have cannot be transformed into tangible things. You need energy to transfer them from one point to another. And it's important for Africa and Nigeria especially to smell the coffee. China did not get to where it is today, if not because China understood the implication of the foundation, which is energy. After that, it started building factory. My point here today, which is the point which I think that Africans, and especially Nigeria, gets to understand, is after the Second World War, Europe became nothing. Nobody was willing to go to Europe. The war has turned Europe upside down. No electricity. The legal system has been turned upside down. Policing system has been largely damaged. But here is the point. How did Europe get it? From mid to late 40s to around, from mid late 40s to around 70s, that Europe got it very, very fast. Because what Europe put forward is energy. After that, reconstruction of different parts of Europe. For Africa and Nigeria, until we put energy first, which is electricity, until it becomes number one, it becomes what our leaders, when you mention Nigerian leader, what do we think comes to the mind? From the speeches our leaders have read in Nigeria, Senegal, Ghana, and all those, Tanzania, what really dominates the mind of our leader? Because what they say the most, we tell us how they are thinking. Is energy really taking preeminence? And I'm not saying that government should provide 100% energy, even in kind of partnership that our authorities have. It should show that what drives them is energy. This is how black nation will not be synonymous with darkness. It was because of darkness our continent was given the name Africa. And for decades and centuries, we have not been able to redeem that image that we are not Africa. We are not just black. But unfortunately, those who named us, most of the countries in Africa, were given name by people that are not Africans. What they called us is darkness or black. Today, are we able to prove them wrong? Several years of independence in Africa, we're still unable to prove them wrong. Even though we have seen some countries like Morocco, they are doing some great things in terms of energy as well as infrastructure. But most part of Africa, we talk more than we do. During elections, even African children or adults don't have confidence in some people that are running. Is that bad? But can it be good? The answer is yes. It takes sincerity from all of us, especially our country here in Nigeria, where we say that we want to demand responsibly, without destroying anything, without fighting anyone, for accountability from governments, from energy to rails, to infrastructure, to security, and so on and so forth, education and health. These are key areas one would think that we'll focus on in the coming period.
Well, Dr. Elijah, I would like to talk about the unbundling of the power sector in Nigeria. I know we used to have what we call NEPA. As a matter of fact, that was what gave birth to the NEPA, which is very synonymous with Nigeria.
Ubiquitous, yes.
Yeah. But after that, I mean, we saw them unbundling that sector to generation, transmission, and distribution. Exactly. Can we go back to have one body that can, own, manage the transmission and even the distribution? Is it possible?
That means we are working backward. See, even what we have today, the discos, the gencos, and transmission company are not able to solve the problem. The new approach now, which government is adopting, is that let state government generate their power. Let them have right over energy. If states will generate, then they can distribute around that environment. The question is, will this solve the problem? Will this bring investment? Will this upgrade transmission concept? Because to a large extent, let me tell you, we are still central in one way transmission is still centrally owned. So
Okay.
even if you generate, you have to sell it to the transmission company who will now resell it to distribution. That's the challenge. I think Nigeria, we need to look at the architecture, energy architecture, rearrange it, look at countries with our size of population, with our kind of diversity. Let me be honest with you. I don't expect the whole of Nigeria to have light suddenly. My solution has been that, can we look at the 6 geopolitical zones? Of these geopolitical zones, which area is actually in high demand, high need of energy, not just for household consumption, I'll be very honest with you, but for industry. Because industry will help us to solve multiple problems. For factories in Northwest, Northeast, North Central, Southwest, Southeast, South. This may be 2 states. Support them. Create incentives to the governors. I mean, when president is traveling, I'm happy we have president that is going to different parts of the world. But beyond the port, we recently signed with an MOU, recently signed in the UK. Can we also look at those that can provide energy and take those governors, 10, 12 of them, or 13 of them, to those areas and say, partner with them, so that energies can be available. Then there is what we call agglomerative economics. That's expansion of economies from one core area to the subordinate regions. So that will now make energy to grow. Revenue will grow for government, energy will be available for industry, employment will grow, inflation will reduce, poverty will reduce, development will come. This is when you will be able to carry your passports anywhere in Nigeria. Energy can also help reducing security. It can help Nigeria to go into not light, but the industry. But is that what we have today? The answer is no. But that's what we should have. Yes.
All right, Dr. Lade, because of time, and because we are talking about solutions, if, I'm sure you recall in the mid-2000s in Katsina State, Nigeria had one of the most ambitious, yet one of the most troubled renewable energy projects, which is the wind farm in Katsina State that was supposed to generate 10 megawatts of electricity to power Katsina and the metropolis. 2 decades later and more, that project is largely abandoned, and all the investment in the wind mills that we see are just lying waste in that part of the country. Because we are talking about solutions, what would you advise state governors to begin to do, especially with that kind of ambitious investment that was done and now lying in waste? Because from the way you speak, when Imo asked you about the Abia investment, Abia project, you are not too, how will I put it? You are not too
impressed
excited
about it. Yes.
About state governors, taking up this project on their own. What would you be telling state government? Because I want to say that if state governments can make investments on their own, maybe diversify, we will begin to see solutions coming forward. But what will be your concrete advice to state governments at this point in time? Dr. Alaje?
Okay, I think we lost him at some point, and yes, he's back. Please go ahead, Dr. Alaje.
Yes, sorry, your colleague was mentioned the Castina alternative energy project that was supposed to a large extent reduce power problem in that region.
Yes.
I can tell you that I went to Castina State, I think 2017 or 2018, and I saw some of those plants, is it wind something? Some of them were lying their back on the ground. I was really disappointed because I didn't even appreciate what I saw until when I went to Germany. And in Germany, I think I traveled from Bremen. Is it Bremen? Bremen towards Hamburg. And I saw similar infrastructure, and I asked my hosts, I saw this infrastructure in Nigeria, but rather than functioning, some of them had their back on the ground. And the man said, that's your electricity that is on the ground. Until you put them up, you make them work, you will only be wondering what is happening. I don't know whether it's a conspiracy of some sort, but I wonder how or why we have so much implants, we have so much we want to do, but even though we acquire the infrastructure, nobody can explain why the Northwest region is still not relying, or if, let's say Katsina State is still not relying on that energy. But I can tell you it generated zero as of today. Maybe tomorrow government will look at it, but I can tell you that what you said, I saw it by myself. I traveled by road from Kano to Katsina, to Daura actually, for a conference. And I saw some of those things, not one, not two, not 10 of them. You know, those devices, large, tall, but some of them were on the ground. And did they bring any energy? The answer is no. So it is not enough for us to conceive idea. It is more than enough for us to look at the environmental acceptance or the conditions that surrounds whether those things can be adopted in our country or not. It's a sad story, but I can tell you as of today, and because we've monitored since that time, they are not giving us anything to add to our energy output. Thank you very much.
Indeed, I'm afraid this is where we'll have to draw the curtain on the show. Thank you so much, Dr. Paul Alaje, Chief Economist at SPM Professional, for taking us through the subject matter. Well, we got a message while the conversation was on from Mr. Olabode, so we mean that he is currently on drip and that he may not be able to join us in the conversation. But we want to thank him for even obliging in the first place to be part of the program. Dr. Paul, thank you so much for your contribution, and it's good to see you again. Thank you. Usman.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much, Dr. Alaje. It's been a very exciting conversation. Anytime conversations around energy in Nigeria comes up, it's always a very exciting one because we all have one or two things to say, but we sincerely thank you for your very professional insight. Of course, if for those who followed us and those who missed a substantial part of the conversation, you can find this broadcast on our website, WADR.org, and all of our streaming platforms. Thank you for listening, and join us next week. I am Usman Umar. Thank you for your time.
And many thanks to Mr. Momuni Nambe, who is still online, and to Andres Steritz, who's been following the program right from the start. And many thanks to all of you on YouTube and Facebook, and of course on radio. Do join us next week for another edition. And a big thanks to Maudo Juf and Mustafa Sek behind the glass. Do join Abdullah Hassan for our midday news. I am Imo Edet. Do have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?
Your current affairs program, Citizens Hour, is now more inclusive